Hello, everyone. Lawrence Temple here, and this is another episode of our show, From There to Here. Today, I have a young man. I've known him for a while. What prompted me to ask him to do this interview were some things he's doing online, a journey that he's on, and a physical journey, and then I guess a non-physical journey. I'm sure he'll get into all of that. So this is our guest is Mr. Shane Bevilacqua that I've known. I've had the privilege on some of these shows to interview people that were my students when I was, their middle school teacher or their high school teacher, and he is definitely one of them. I've known him since he was in the eighth grade, much shorter than he is now. So, Mr. Bevilacqua, hello,
Hey, Mr. Temple.
man. I hope you're doing well. Are you good?
I'm doing great. And I got to tell you, I was kind of nervous coming in today because I'll talk a little more about it later on, obviously. But you were probably much bigger influence on my life than you probably ever know. And so when you reached out to me to do this, flatter doesn't begin to describe it.
Well, I'm equally excited too, because I flash back to when you guys were, the age that you were once upon a time, and when I'm filling the blanks about things that have happened. I know some, but not a whole lot. All right, so let me do what I do with almost all the guests. I start off by asking you what would be your elevator speech, and that's a term I learned at a workshop, which is, as you probably already know, let's say you're in an elevator and you only have a few seconds to talk to the person to tell them to sum up who you are. When they say, "Hey, who are you?" What if you only had those few seconds to boil down you? What would you say as your elevator speech?
It's a good question. I would probably say that I am an amalgamation of all the things that have ever happened to me and around me. And I try to do my best to take those things and enrich my life and the life of the people that are around me. If I can do anything to improve someone's day, improve someone's life, the returns tenfold.
I get.
Um, that's
I
probably what I would
like
tell them if I only have 15 seconds.
that. Then no, that was a thoughtful and wide-ranging answer. And there's a gosh, I could go 100 ways with almost every two words that you said. Let's start with this. What for a living, so to speak, or your day job or whatever? What is that for the people out here who don't know?
Yeah, I'll tell you, if you'd asked me that question, even just 3 months ago, my answer would have been, well, I'm an executive director at a global non type 1 diabetes research foundation, and I oversee a $9 million budget, and I have 10 staff people, and boy, my work is so fulfilling. But what's happened since I decided to go on a sabbatical 3 months ago was that I realized that we're all a whole lot more than how we make a living. And so, but we've kind of become used to that, leading with that. That's who we are. That's what makes us up. And truth be told, it's such a small fraction of who we really are and what we really do. And so, what I would tell you now is I'm kind of getting to know myself. I kind of did all the things. I made all the smart choices everybody told me to make, get a good job, and I didn't go to college. I'm not a college graduate. I've done pretty well for myself considering. But I don't know. I'm turning 36 this year, Mr. Temple, and I want to have even more of an impact than I was, and I knew I needed to step away and create the space to reevaluate my life to be able to go to that next level. Though I don't even really know what that is yet.
See, well, now this is right in line with kind of the general theme of our show. It's from there to here. And something that comes up a lot is the idea of transitions, going from what I was doing to something else. Sometimes the was something bad, and now they're going to something good. But a lot of times the was a good thing, and now they're moving into a different or another good thing. So let me ask you, what prompted this desire to change, or this, I don't know, dissatisfaction with how things were? What was the impetus for this, and how far back does it go?
Yeah, and honestly, yeah, you bring up a good point. My stepping away from my career, which had been previously in a pretty straight line, wasn't deficiency or disappointment or COVID or any of the sort of normal things you would imagine. I don't know. look, I wasn't a very good student, but I always loved to learn. I always loved to grow, and so I wasn't good in practical schooling. Like I wasn't a good test taker. I wasn't good at the practical parts of it, but I loved the process of it. I loved the process of getting excited about something and learning everything you can. And I don't want to say that I felt like I reached a plateau, because it's not like I was the CEO of the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. But I felt like I knew I had hit a ceiling. I knew there was something just telling me. I've always done that. I've always listened to my intuition. I've always been able to kind of stop and think and listen and wait for a response back on if I'm where I'm supposed to be and if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm telling you, something happened when I started thinking about my 36th birthday, that there was a way for me to align what I really love to spend my free time doing. There was a way to make that work where it could help other people. It could provide a living for my wife and I. And that's sort of the journey that I've taken now, creating the Brazen Traveler and all the things that means for me going forward.
That's interesting. Maybe there's something about that age, because I know around that age, because I was a teacher, and it was around that age everything was going fine, but I wanted to investigate other things. So then I did a change, became an administrator and different things. So maybe that age has some magic to it. I'm not sure.
It might. I don't know. I don't know what you think about numerology, but there's an interesting all numbers reduced down to single digit numbers. And so 36 really represents nine, and nine is the number of ultimate manifestation. And so I don't know what could be on the other side of all this for me, but I'm really excited about it. And it's kind of scary, right? I mean, when you step out, I mean, that's the one thing everyone's like, oh my gosh, you guys sold your house, you bought an RV, you're living the dream. And but like most things, that's not what it's actually like in real life, right? When you're living it, it's scary to not have that steady income. It's scary to not have that continuity, that security of the job you've had for 15 years. And certainly not a complaint, but there's a lot of new muscles that have to be flexed that I don't think I fully knew I was going to have to do when we started on the journey.
Do you think, and since we talk about growing and changing, do you think you would have had I don't know, the nerve, I guess, to do something like make a change like this 2 years ago?
I think the simple answer is no, because I probably would have. I'm not that much different of a person than I was 2 years ago, but no, I think, there's a lot. I married my absolute best friend in November of 2020. In COVID, had a big old COVID wedding.
Wow.
And I never fully appreciated how transformational it can be when you really find a life partner. I had some, incredible, wonderful people in my life prior, but when you really find your life partner, some of the things they're able to help you see about yourself, some of the things that they can even at times give you the courage to do. No, I don't think that no matter what, I would have been able to do this 2 years ago.
Wow. That's the change part, because I teach school, of course, and younger people, young people, they seem to think, okay, I'll become 18, so now I turn to this adult, and pretty much I'm done changing. I'm an adult now, and I'm set. And I think what I'm starting to hear from you is that's not exactly how it works. Am I right?
Yeah, when I turned 21, and you remember me, I mean, I never thought of myself as like a bad kid, but I was always, my personality and my I don't know, wit, if you will, always got me in trouble. I was always mouthing off. I wasn't hurting anybody, but but the truth of the matter was I didn't have any direction. Like I wasn't working towards anything. And so everything was a joke and nothing was serious. And there are reasons for that. Obviously, I know now, but I joined, I say this as, one of the moments in my life where I was put on a different path and my eyes were open to things. I joined a Freemason lodge when I was 21 years old by complete accident. And the short version is, it was the first time in my life where I had had consistent positive male role model influence,
Okay.
and not having a dad play that function in my really informative years. I didn't know, but I was searching for structure. I was searching for continuity. I was searching for guardrails, all through those, funny times, if you will. And when I figured that out, this group of men who, some 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, that didn't have to take the time to invest in me and did. It's hard to describe, but it created this gratefulness. It created this sense of, okay, wait, I owe it to more people than myself to live out my full potential. And I think that's kind of where it shifted. And that set me on the path for, okay, we're never done. They're gonna put me 6 feet under, and I still have stuff to work on. And if I forget that, I'm not going to come close to my potential, right? And it was because of those guys, those men that helped illuminate that for me.
Wow. I could. That's powerful. And I definitely believe in that, in the power of role models, examples, someone who's kind of like me, but they're farther down the road than I am. I see that. Um,
Yeah.
Now you kind of hinted at it, but you have been really explicit. So what is it? You were working for that research firm, etc. So what exactly are you doing now and been doing these last 3 months?
Yeah. And thank you for asking me this too, because it's kind of, really who I am. And, it's not always comfortable talking about yourself. It's, I'd rather be interested than interesting. So being on this end of the podcast is also different for me. Um, but I started the Brazen Traveler because I've lived with pretty severe anxiety my entire life, very severe anxiety. And, I was always afraid to do a lot of things, particularly as a young person. And it stopped me from experiences and travel and things that I was clamoring to do, but too afraid to do. And I've noticed that, my generation and younger, there's still this stigma that exists. It has to go away. People don't fully understand what anxiety is. They don't fully appreciate how to potentially work through it if you're the person, how to be there for somebody who's going through it if you don't get it. And that's what the Brazen Traveler is all about, right? Is we sold our home, we bought an RV, and we're going cross country for the foreseeable future. And I'm sure you can appreciate the need to pivot and change. And if it can go wrong, boy, it does. And those create opportunities for panic attacks and anxiety and fear. And so I would tell you, like, I'm I'm trying to help other people by working on myself. And if I can share my journey with people, and it even helps one person go, you know what, I can get on that plane, or you know what, I can go for that job, or I can reconnect with a family member I'm afraid to whatever it is.
Wow.
If that can happen, then the Brazen Traveler worked.
Now say that name again. Is it the Brazen Traveler? Is that a
You got it.
website? What is that?
Yeah, so I built a website and I have a blog where I share my personal story and journey. The website, which is brazentraveler.com, is more really centered around mental health awareness and me sharing my personal story. For the rest of the other 99%, I've got all my social media channels at the Brazen Traveler, which are tutorials on where we've been, things you might want to see. I really want, for it to have broad appeal, but my purpose is to try to help people who might be afraid to get out of their comfort zone. And if that's what I'm looking to do.
That the whole theme of anxiety and dealing with our mental health, that that has come up on 2 or 3 of these episodes. My first guest, my second guest ever, was my friend from childhood, who is a psychiatrist, and she's written a book about anxiety, and we talked about that. And then one of my more recent guests is a lawyer, and she talked about struggles that she had with anxiety as a young person in college age and all of that. And it's amazing that theme keeps coming up, even unprovoked. It's nothing that I put in the script or anything. And one thing I said to one of those guests is that dealing with younger people of my age or even a little bit older than you and up, you didn't talk about anxiety and mental health and stuff. It just wasn't anything you knew to talk about. And now with younger people, it's talked about more, of course, which is good. It's not buried in the sand. But something that I'm seeing, I want to see your perspective. Sometimes younger people, when they acknowledge that they have some thing, anxiety or whatever, I think sometimes they misunderstand that and they misunderstand our understanding as to say, I have this and I'm crippled by it. So no, I can't do X, Y, and Z ever because Mr. Temple, I have ABC. Like somewhere the message of working with or working through what you have gets lost with young people often. And they seem to feel like it's a sentence that I just couldn't, I have X, so I can never do Y. What are you saying about that?
Yeah, and I want to answer the question, at first as delicate as I can, because I think that, everyone's walk with, anything, cancer to mental health, it's personal journey, right? And how you react in those situations is incredibly subjective. It's not as objective as it might be nice if it were, because then kind of a one-stop shop for fixing all, right?
Okay.
And so what I would tell you about that is that's also a really big motivation for why I'm doing this, because I feel like the clinical community has really started to step up to the plate, and there's books being written about it, and it's sort of becoming normalized in the clinical space. But it's in the translational space that I really care about, because I'll just give you a quick anecdote. When I first started working in my early career at the American Cancer Society, I was told that, back in the day, it was called the C word, was it communicable? It was a sturdy thing. Now, if you had cancer, I mean, my God, it's a source of absolute, community, rallying, right? You rally around a breast cancer survivor or uh, anyone that has cancer, right? There's this platform now to rally and let it be a source of strength, but it wasn't always like that. And that's how I feel about anxiety. Is it's time for people who live with it, who have found healthy ways of coping with it beyond medication. It's not to say you shouldn't take medication, but for other options in addition to or separate from your choice. Those people need to step up and start talking about what it's like to really live with it, because the number one thing that I saw you could do if you were a cancer survivor and you survived was to come out and say, I survived, because the rest of the community now has all the hope and the inspiration they need to give it 100%. And so for me, when I blog on the Brazen Traveler, when I make a post, and I did this just recently, was driving up to Moab, and I mean, you're hours from life. I mean, other than the few cars you see on the road, there's nothing. And so that's part of one of my triggers for me. And so I wrote about the entire experience. I wrote about the lead up. I wrote about the moment that I thought like it was just going to be over and this is where my story would end for no rational reason. But then I wrote about, hey, but when I got on the other side and I was able to see where I was at and just the beauty that was in the simplistic nature that was around me, I got to experience a whole new high. And so, I don't ever say, you got to work up to beating your anxiety. My philosophy is you have to be able to just learn how to thrive through it. It may be something you live with forever, but that's okay. That doesn't need to be seen as like some impediment or some disability that now you're just stuck with forever. You can still do everything you want to do if you take the steps and practice getting through whatever your episodes may be.
Man, some of the biggest words you said, you said the phrase getting through. You even said the word practice, like what your daily practices dealing with that thing, as opposed to it being a brick wall and that's just the end of my progress. Do you think, okay, you're a relatively young man, a baby as far as I'm concerned, but being only in your mid 30s, I want what your perspective is of this. There is more talk about mental health and anxiety in particular these days. There are some that feel that it's that our world is more anxiety inducing, that we have more pressures and things that can make you anxious, nervous, etc. And there are others that feel like possibly the world is not any more anxiety creating than it ever was, but we're aware of it more, so it's talked about more. Do you have a perspective as to which of those is the case?
Yeah, look, I think this is going to be a kind of broad answer, but I think it's the most accurate answer, from my perspective. I think it's just part of evolution. If you think about, there's a quote, I may mess it up, but you'll get the point. It's like, tough times make strong men make easy times, easy men make weak times, or excuse me, make weak men make hard times make strong men. And you kind of see the cyclical nature of it. And I say that because what I think's happened is, what a heck of a time to be alive right now. You want something to eat, you hit a button, and almost anything you could ever imagine shows up. You need medical care. I mean, you don't have to leave your home. You can get just about every single thing done in home these days. Part of what I think's happened is life's gotten so much easier. We've lost the perspective on how much easier it is. And it's in that space where things that maybe wouldn't have seemed as difficult 50 years ago, 100 years ago, I use the word legitimately seem that difficult now. And we're in this period where you've got some folks who did, you think about somebody who was born as 90 years old, life looked a lot different 90 years ago than it does today. And so I think there is just the normal gap that's always existed between the oldest generation and the youngest generation, not fully appreciating and understanding one another's problems and, and how, where they're at in the world today. If I could say it that way.
Oh, I get that. My father's 90, and so yeah, his perspective and on things is totally different than mine, which is younger than the ones different than the ones younger than me. And I remember at a church I used to attend, we would do these work projects, working on the building or whatever. And I learned never to say the phrase "I'm tired" around Mr. I'll call him Mr. Mike, because if I was say 45 at the time, he was like 68 or 70. I said tired around him once, and he proceeded to tell me about what is really, well, I was in the coal mine back in 62 and all this kind of stuff, you know what I'm saying? But I realized, so it relates to the perspective difference that you are exactly talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's natural, like most problems. I don't think they just creep up and they're just accidental or happenstance. I think it's just a part of our cultural, psychological, physical evolution where these new problems occurred and we just don't have all the tools yet to deal with it, right? But 50 years, again, that's one of the things I think is really important, whether you live with anxiety or not. I think perspective is such an undervalued skill set in this day and age, because we want things so quickly and so instantly that we've kind of forgotten. If you ask somebody, I'll give you another story. When I first joined the Masonic Lodge, there was this guy, Brother Dick was his name. And at that time, that was 15 years ago, he was 97, 98. I said, Brother Dick, I said, what's the greatest invention that's ever happened in your lifetime? And he said, the flushing toilet. I said, Mr. Dick, that was 400 years ago. What do you mean the flushing toilet? Like that was 1,000 years ago. But it just put in perspective, was there 3 generations between me and him, 2.5 generations? And it just puts in perspective that we're all living here on earth at the same time, but we all are living in different worlds simultaneously. And again, it kind of comes back to part of the purpose of the Brazen Traveler. I've been really fortunate to have, what I would call an incredibly like multicultural, like young adult life. The Masonic Lodge I'm a part of, I'm, one of a handful of white men. And so I've gotten the opportunity to experience other cultures, and it's kind of opened my eyes to, that we all have a way of doing this. We all show up with, different experiences, baggage, incredible life wisdom, and we need each other a whole lot more than we really appreciate. And so again, it's kind of something the Brazen Traveler is all about, is meeting different groups, meeting with different people. A lot of my blogs are about, I had breakfast with a 75-year-old owner of an RV park, and it was just all about, tell me about your life and what got you to here. He loved telling me about his life, but I promise you, I got more out of it. And I want to bring that back. I feel like the people that are in their 20s and 30s are more disconnected than ever from the people that are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I want to do whatever I can do to help bridge that dividing, because we need what y'all have learned. We need it. It needs to be passed on to us. And we need to wake up a little bit to receiving it. And again, if that's something that I can help do, that's something that's important to me.
No, I understand that very clearly. I can remember being in college, and there was a couple that wasn't that they weren't old by any means. They were probably, if I was 20, they were probably early 40s, I guess. But they were very influential to me in conversation and just kind of watching the guy. He was a member of the church I went to, and I used to watch this gentleman, just how he carried himself, how he related to his kids, how he was kind of an athletic guy, what he would do athletically with the kids at church or whatever. And he became kind of like a, not a total template, because I had good parents at home. It's not like like I didn't have that. But even if you have a great home life or great models at home, having them outside your house is another level of power, I think. So yeah, so that messaging between generations is very powerful, I think. I want to ask you, how about, sometime I like to, on this, I do highs and lows on the journey you've been on these last 3 months. Well, can you tell me what's one of this might be even a literal mountaintop experience that you've had, and then an experience that what wasn't so great that you could relate to us?
Yeah. Over, you said over the last 3 months or lifetime or what?
I said 3 months. I'll change that. You can make it about these 3 months or any times in life, whatever you want to do with that.
I'm the only reason I'm going to switch it to lifetime is because kind of what we've been talking about here. I'm happy to tell you about our travel. We've been lucky to have these travels, but you know, I think the low point of my life wasn't really necessarily one thing. You could point to parents' divorce or a bad grade, or you point to any one-off situation. But um, I think the low point of my life was before I realized that I was allowed to lean into my greatness. I used to be really, really afraid to just be me. I didn't think it was okay. I thought it was selfish, thought it was, overly cocky. And there is a version of that, right? There's definitely a version of that. But I didn't know that it was okay. I didn't quite know how to. And so then everything around me kind of seemed worse. And if something went wrong, I was making excuses for it, or, because I wasn't living my authentic self. I wasn't showing up as Shane. And the day that I learned, moments I learned that it was okay to lean into who you are. It's okay to not be liked by people because it means you're showing up as your true self. Somebody that doesn't have anyone that dislikes them's not probably not being authentic. You
Wow.
got to have a few people you rub the wrong way, or else are
Wow.
you really showing up?
Okay. Okay.
And ever since that time, I don't know, I've become a lot more grateful. And that's the high. If I could mention one more thing, I think our culture has gotten really stuck on this word happy. And I think it contributes to an immense amount of disappointment and an inappropriate perspective. You're going to be happy, you're going to be sad. Those two things are going to happen all the time, but you can always be grateful, and that doesn't have to change. And you have to remind yourself of it. I'm not sitting here telling you I wake up every day and I just remember, oh my God, I'm so lucky. You have to find ways to remind yourself and build it into being a practice. But that is what I feel like I got from leaning in and being my true authentic self and learning to deal with the highs and the lows was you can always be grateful, and therefore you can always be okay.
Goodness. That is, I just super, that resonates, super co-signed with that. I think we do have these unrealistic expectations of being just, happy, excited all the time. So we have no tolerance for anything negative. I remember when I was working at a high school, a parent had come, a couple of parents were standing in the waiting room to pick up their kids early from school. And one of the parents had a small child as well. And somehow in conversation, I overheard that parent say, I think the other parent said something like, I just want my kids to be happy. And the kid with the small child said, no, I don't want that. He said, I want my child to be healthy, taken care of, all of that. But what he said was, if I gave my kid a bag of M&Ms every day, all day, he'd be happy. He'd be getting what he wanted, but it wouldn't be good for him. And everything that he wants and that makes him happy is not necessarily the best for him. And I just love the way he put that, and it seems to connect with what some of what I believe you're talking about.
Yeah, I agree in spades.
And what a quote! What can you talk about how my recording was had about 10 minutes left, and that's perfect. Can you tell me how you've seen yourself or your wife change, or what, I don't know, revelations maybe that you've had? It's not like you have to have your whole life figured out in 3 months. That's pretty quick. But what changes or Shane view have been altered or revealed in these last few months?
It's a great question. It's always harder when you're in it, right? That perspective. um, I don't know that my perspective changed, but the proof has. So I've always kind of had this idea that if there was something I wanted to do, I could go do it. But if you don't go do it, then do you really ever know? And I think what I'm starting to realize is 3 months in, that if there is something that I want to do or anybody wants to do for that matter, don't wait, go do it, because it's the worst thing you find out is not that you probably can't do it. Worst case scenario is you find out you don't want to, and then you just change again. And that's not advocating for the value of continuity, like working somewhere for a long time and building up your skill sets. I think you have to pick your places intelligently where you take risks and mitigated risks. But it was the right timing. We had made some good financial decisions, or we'd gotten lucky with some financial decisions, so we had the luxury to do this.
Okay.
But more importantly, what part of your first question was about my wife, and I would be remiss if I did not say that of all the things she showed me, unconditional love, you see it in parents, you expect it out of parents, right? You expect a parent to love you unconditionally, or if you mess up or make mistakes, or if you're not doing something well, but you don't expect the outside world to give you that same level of patience and understanding. And that's what this has really shown me is, I was the breadwinner, if you will, before all of this. And my wife quit her job a few years ago and wanted to figure out what was next for her. Fast forward 18 months, landed her absolute dream job. She's thriving. And as a result of that, Mr. Temple, she was able to go fully remote, which gave us the latitude for me to be able to quit and still have income and be able to pursue my dreams. So I want to be really clear about that. What I've learned is that, if there's something you want to do, go do it, but have a plan for how you get there, and don't let the plan be to put it off, right? I mean, but set a goal and set a strategy and set a plan for how you can get from where you're at to where you want to be, and then pray for the patience to be able to see that through. And I'm telling you, right, I wouldn't be who I am, where I am, doing what I'm trying to do right now if I did not absolutely have my wife, Katie, playing the role that she plays every day for me and for our family.
I love that. And sound like you're talking about the balance between faith, because you're doing a thing you've never done before, and faith and desire and passion. But on the other hand, the practicality of, yes, I have these dreams and stuff, but okay, let's plan how we're going to do it. Let's not just throw caution to the total wind. The balance of faith and planning. Would you agree that that's part of your
Oh yeah.
journey?
You have to make smart decisions. And once again, this isn't stuff you come up with on your own. I mean, it's everything we just talked about. If I hadn't had the mentorship, if every single thing that has happened in my life to this point didn't happen, I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing, talking to you, right? It'd be a completely different script. And so, again, making smart decisions, knowing what you want to do. And I'm saying this to my generation and younger. Patience is a virtue we really have to remember, because life is long, and it doesn't mean sit around complacent, but life is long, and odds are you're going to live to a healthy, ripe age. And so you want to get to the end. Mr. Temple, that's another thing. I think, I had the privilege of working around older, wealthier people for the last 15 years. And there's two things that are abundantly clear is, number one, no amount of money matters if you're not healthy. No amount of money matters if you're not healthy. And making smart financial decisions isn't that hard if you can delay gratification. Every one of them that's been successful, that's healthy, and pretty much does whatever they want now, was able to delay gratification, and they took care of themselves along the road with almost no exceptions.
Wow, that's one of the heaviest things that you said this entire thing, because it's doable. It's powerful but doable. Well, I guess this will be maybe my last question, but it will sum up a lot of things. It's an imaginary scenario that I gave a couple of other guests. let's say a friend of yours who's about the same age, who knows you well, brings their um, son to you, who's about to graduate high school, a couple months from graduating, and he doesn't have just one big burning thing that he wants to do with his life, and he's a good guy and he wants to do well, but he's just a little directionless as to what to do. And your friend brings him to you because they admire how you've lived your life, and they say, just go take him to lunch and see if you can help him out. What do you think your conversation would revolve around if you were talking to this 18-year-old of 2 months from graduating high school?
So let's assume for a second in this hypothetical that I had time to ask the young man questions first to get to know him, and that would be obviously really paramount before I started giving him any advice. But my advice still would probably be somewhere in the vein of, now is the time in your life where you can completely screw up. Now is the time in your life where you can absolutely go for the craziest things you think you want to go for, because you have time on your side.
Mm.
From there, the rifle, if you will, the rifle approach would be, think about the cross section between things that you're good at and something you're passionate about. If you could find the cross section of something that you're passionate about, then you'll give all of your waking hours to it and you won't hate it. You'll love every minute of it. And if you have even any skill in it, then you'll be good at it. And if you stick with that, it would be really hard to fail. It would be very, very hard to fail. And I'm glad you asked this question, because that's what I think most people, this is what I think happens to us. You said it earlier about learning. We think we get to college, or like I said, I didn't go to college. So either you get to high school or you get to after college, and you kind of think you like did it. Like now it's time, like you have the kids, have the wife, settle down and just find my groove in the recorder, That's crazy. Everything you did from birth to 20 was just to prep you to be able to do the rest of it. Like it's, you just walk through one portal, one doorway. And so don't turn 18, don't turn 22, whatever the number is for you. Don't graduate high school or college and think, okay, I have to make a decision I'm now going to do for the rest of my life. Like, stop and pause and think about something you're probably good at and something you're really passionate about, and just go for it.